for our council meeting. And Madam Clerk, have we met all the requirements for the noticing of this meeting?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. And will you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Here.
Ms. Cromiller?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Here. Mr. Liverman?
Here.
Ms. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Simon? Here. And Mayor Lempert.
Here. This past week, we heard some very sad news of the passing of Paul Sigmund, who is the husband of former Mayor Barbara Sigmund, and a real fixture in the community. Touched many lives, and I'd like to start tonight's meeting with a moment of silence for the passing of Paul Sigmund. Thank you. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have several sets of minutes on our agenda this evening, and I'd like to start by seeing if there are any changes or comments on the minutes for March 24th. Seeing none, how about for April 1st? Or April 9th? Or April 16th? Okay, congratulations. Is there a motion to...
Second.
All four sets of minutes have been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Mayor, I was not present for one of the meetings, so...
I think you weren't present for one of them, too.
Okay,
I mean,
let's take them one at a time then. So let's go back to March 20th. We have to make sure that people are voting were present at the meetings.
Can we just say if you weren't meeting it?
Well, I think there were enough absences that we want to, it's probably just easier. So for March 24th, is there a
Aye.
motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's
Second.
moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any abstentions for absences? Mr. Simon abstains because he is absent.
I forget, did I miss any? I don't remember which ones. I'm not looking at them because my computer's not open. I looked at them earlier, but,
No, you're good.
okay.
Okay. The next set of minutes for April 1st, is there a motion?
I abstain.
Yeah, so moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
And Mr. Liverman abstains. And the minutes for April 1st passed. The minutes for April 9th, is there a motion?
So,
You were absent on this one.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Ms. Howard abstains, and the minutes pass. And the last set of minutes for April 16th, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any abstentions for this? Nope. Okay. Those pass. Thank you. And now we get to the part of our meeting where we hear from comments from the public. We started the meeting right on time, so pulled the sheet. So there wasn't a sign up ahead of time. But if anybody would like to speak, I welcome you to come to the microphone. And if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes. We have a very full agenda tonight. And I just want to remind folks, too, that this is for items that are not on the agenda. So if you want to speak about the budget or something else that comes on later, I'd ask you to please hold your comments till we get to that part of the agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to speak?
Paul Driscoll, Harris Road. I'm addressing the issue again concerning the Whitman's original draft that he referred to on March 10th. And I've gotten different reports back from different people that many of the council people have not seen the original draft, but I know that at least one or two have seen the original draft, and their concerns have been fully addressed, and I do appreciate that, because I'm glad that at least someone has seen it. But I believe at last meeting Joe Butler had, correct me if I'm wrong, had suggested or asked if this document could be made available to the public. And I would like to know if at this point, if there has been some discussion on that, and if it could be made available to the public.
I'm going to refer that question to our attorney.
Thank you. As I advised the council, and as I think I had previously advised publicly as well, it's the report that's being discussed is a preliminary draft of what Dr. Whitman ultimately recommended to the council, and drafts are very clearly exempt from disclosure under the Open Public Records Act. And so my advice to the council has been and remains that this preliminary draft not be released. Dr. Whitman's ultimate recommendations are contained both in the draft that he issued in March, and then the supplemental report that, I'm sorry, not the draft, the report he issued in March, and then the supplemental report that he issued in April after the council requested supplementation of his ultimate recommendations without regard to what Avalon Bay would or would not agree to.
All right, but my understanding is that what Ira Whitman referred to as his original draft was actually a working document, and he met with Avalon Bay prior to showing that document to anybody on town council. And he is a independent LSRP that is paid for by the town. He represents the town, not Avalon Bay. So it seems awkward that he would have met with representatives or consultants of Avalon Bay prior to discussing it with people on town council. How can he say it's a draft if he's referring to it as a working document that he is using when he is negotiating with Avalon Bay? And in fact, I think lead was actually negotiated out of the soil testing at that time. So once it's shared, I don't know if it's verbally or how it was done, doesn't it become a public document? After all, it's the town that paid for it.
Well, my understanding is, and I've checked repeatedly, I've been told repeatedly that preliminary draft, a copy was not given to Avalon Bay. So it remains just that, a preliminary draft. And again, as I said, my advice remains that that is exempt from disclosure under OPRA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Linda Auerbach, Lytle Street. I had a quick question for Mr. Kaiser. Fairly simple, and then I wanted to make a comment and thank some people. Mr. Kaiser, I noticed there are open sort of gate areas where gates will eventually be installed along the fencing by Lambert House, the main entrance to the hospital, and on Henry Avenue. Is there work going on the hospital site apart from the fencing being installed? Permitted work?
Mr. Kaiser.
If I could comment, Avalon Bay is still removing doors and carpeting from the building, I am told. And also they are checking on the underground fuel tanks in anticipation of getting ready to remove them. The gates at each of those locations still have to be installed yet. And also there's some fabric has been installed on the fencing, but not all. That remains to be completed as well.
Okay, so there's nothing going on at this point. I don't mean to insult you by my question, but I just want to be reassured. There's nothing going on at this point that could possibly pose a hazard to public safety or welfare.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank, before I make another remark, the following people, and I'm thanking them in the order in which I contacted them over the last few weeks since April 8th. I would like to thank Chip Sugg, Bill Drake, Elisa Neira, Police Officer Schubert, who is an angel, Jeff Grosser, Mayor Lempert, Bob Bushai, and Kathy Monzo. Now, I want to thank you because I live across the street from a nightmare. a standalone housing unit owned by Sanford Zeitler at 7 Lytle Street. I have lived across the street from this place for 14 years. On April 8th, I discovered the conditions under which the people were living. Now, I know normally there's a great emphasis placed on whether there's overcrowding in the town. What I would like to see more of an emphasis placed on, because it's far more significant, is the habitability of the rental units. Overcrowding does not necessarily put people at risk. In fact, Mr. Hillier, a number of years ago, stated in the newspaper that illegal immigrant housing posed a fire hazard in the Witherspoon area. I checked into local newspaper reports and found that most of the fires, if not 99% of them that had occurred in Princeton, happened in restaurants, Constitution Hill, Jefferson Road, Dempsey Place, all over the town. I couldn't find a single instance of a fire that had occurred in one of the illegal immigrant housing situations. Okay? So I'm more interested in the town, through all of its boards and agencies, assuring, perhaps suspending interest in the overcrowding issue at this time, and dwelling more on regular inspection of rental properties and making sure that they are brought up to code with plumbing, electricity, heating systems, etc. Because this dwelling has existed, to my certain knowledge, in the condition in which it is. The only improvements that have basically been made have been made by hardworking tenants who were trapped there and forced to make the improvements on their own because they wanted to make it more livable. And because they're decent, hardworking people and enterprising. I would like to see more emphasis placed, as I said, on regular, every 2-year inspections. I would also like to find out why it is not possible, when PSE&G is called out because of a gas leak, that the owner, or at least the municipal government, be informed by PSE&G for public safety. We had a gas leak there October 11th. I'm not aware that anyone in the town knew about this. I don't even think the owner of the property was contacted. That there must be some sort of interaction between the utility companies, because there was the risk of an explosion when that gas leak occurred. Fire department, police responded. So more emphasis on the infrastructure rather than on the overcrowding. The overcrowding, of course, is an issue, but it's not dangerous in the same way that faulty electrical wiring, lack of heat when it's sub 20 degrees, especially to infants, lead paint, which I'm sure hasn't been tested for in most of these places. I would just like to see something like that happen.
Thank you.
I've logged 11,000 translations since I counted them, roughly, if I take one a day since 1983. And some of them were phone calls to translate in my workplaces, blah, 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 to the doctors, judges, in front of judges. Some of them involved 72-hour nursing care to people. So had I charged for it, I'd be worth $500,000 right now. I didn't, and I couldn't. But I would like people whose responsibility it is to get something done about inspecting the houses, not scaring people about overcrowding, but just to make sure the places are up to code.
Okay,
Because this has been going on for decades, and that this particular property has not been torn down or shut down is, to me, incomprehensible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But thank you for your efforts.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Jim Floyd, 64 Harris Road. I'll only take 2 minutes. Question: who is the final determinant regarding the date for Communiversity? I'm asking 364 days ahead of time. Hopefully I'll get an answer tonight. Yesterday was a nightmare. Our church property, our congregates, the neighbors, they had no place to park. The police were as gentle as they could be but they had to do some directing under some adverse conditions. The question's simple one, who makes the determination regarding Saturday or Sunday? You don't have to give me an answer tonight. You can give it to me the 363rd day. But I'd like to know.
Well, it's a festival put on by the Arts Council in collaboration with the town and the university, as you know.
I'm mindful of that because
and-
the application signed by Mr. Nathanson did state that.
Right, and they've done outreach both to the Princeton Merchants Association and to the Clergy Association, and this is a situation where if you have it on Saturday, you make the merchants upset.
I'm
because they lose
mindful of
business.
that,
If you have it
Mayor,
on
I don't mean
Sunday-
to cut you off,
Right.
but you
So
said make it short, and I'm delighted to do it. Who makes the determination as to when it can be held? That's my question.
I think it's a group, in the past, there's been a group meeting where,
Does it have to be approved by mayor and council, or
not the date.
administrator, or whom?
Let me try to interject a couple things, Mr. Floyd. What normally has happened is there is a group meeting. It's done months in advance.
A board meeting?
Group between the university representatives, the community people from the Arts Council, and the administrative staff. And we agree upon a date, which is normally, or in the past, has been always the last weekend in April. A couple years ago, there was this effort to try to change the date, to try to accommodate a different group of constituents in town, and it was agreed we would try that to see how that worked and then evaluate it. So at some point within the next month or so, we'll sit down, we'll recap this year's event, look at comments that we've all gotten, bring those to the table so that they can be considered over the next couple months, and then sometime later on this year, we'll look towards setting the date for next year. And I can tell you, I know that the issue with clergy will be one. Although parking is always an issue in town, it is a special issue that day because we just, there certainly is not enough to provide parking for the size of the event. So that's always becomes a little burdensome on the outside neighborhood. So again, we'll be taking a look at that and whatever alternatives we have for parking off-site and busing, which we did this year. I don't know how successful that was, but we'll get a report on that and continue to evaluate it.
My hearing's bad. Who makes the determination as to whether it can be Saturday, Sunday, or whatever? That's my question. Purely and simply.
Well, it's
Are you doing it by committee?
Pretty much by committee, that's correct.
Then I would like to be on that committee.
Okay, well, let's say then.
But who makes the final decision?
Final decision is made by the people that are running the event. Now,
I see.
we could very easily just say we're not providing police or public works on
No.
that day. We could leverage that, but that has not been our past practice.
May I suggest, and quite frankly, turn to council, there has to be a resolution passed in order to do it, doesn't it?
No, we never have. I mean, the only big issue is closing the state highway. The rest of that is all under local jurisdiction, and they
So
apply to the state.
what I'm asking simply is this. Does the municipal body or someone in some governing position have the authority to say, no, that's an inconvenience? You all don't have that authority.
No. The council could certainly exercise that authority.
That's my question. Do they have the final authority? Mayor, please.
We have it in the past. What we've tried to do is to have representatives there from the Clergy Association and from the Merchants Association and try to work out something that's fair. And it might be something where in the future we alternate back and forth so that there's less of we spread out the inconvenience. There's when you have 30,000, 40,000 people coming into town, there's going to be an inconvenience that's created for somebody. And so we have to try to balance that in the best way we can and in the fairest way we can. So I hear what you're saying.
I understand all of the ramifications. Believe me, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know who has the final decision, that's all. That's pretty simple. It's a straightforward question. And if you're telling me it's by committee, that's it. Then I'm in the wrong place. I'll go to the committee meeting. Keep in mind, there are 4 predominantly African-American churches. all within 4 blocks of each other. And for the last, I know, at least 75 or 80 years, as long as I've been in town, at least one of them has relied on some parking on the street. It predates Arts Council, predates Communiversity, and all the others. And I must say, and the university was very kind. They took their parade off the street, and it's confined to the university property. Now we get something to replace it, and it works to the disadvantage of neighbors as well as the houses of worship. And you're telling me the judgment will be made sometime between now and next year by a committee. Is that the answer?
Well, it's the Arts Council puts on the event, so they consult
They send an
with groups.
application to you all,
Correct.
don't they? There's a request that comes to
Yeah.
the administrator.
For certain items,
And
that's
that
correct.
request was signed by Mr. Nathanson, not the merchants, not the clergy, but Mr. Nathanson for the Arts Council.
That's correct. It is their event.
I know it's
So
correct.
they-
I got a copy of it. Now, all I want to know is who makes the final decision?
It's done at that committee, Jim. I'd be happy to reach out to you when they meet.
No, I don't want
No?
you to reach out to me. I want to know who makes the decision at the moment.
The people that make the decision sit at that meeting. It's predominantly Jeff Nathanson and the university.
Oh,
They
so
look
there's
at
really
that.
no need to send anything to you requesting anything.
There are a lot of things that we could impact negatively and positively on this event.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else?
No, but I was, can I just say, yeah, I do think that Mr. Floyd has a very strong point. What's happening, it's not just so much the Art Council event. There are other events also that have deemed that Sunday would be a good time to have them. And I'm just worried that this will be a trend, that there'll be more and more events on Sunday mornings. So far, we have 2 major events now. I believe it's the High Tops event on Sunday, and it's the Art Communiversity. And they're doing it because it's better than on Saturday because of how it reflects the merchants. My concern is that if we keep going in that direction, that everything's on Sunday, then it is going to be a major, major problem. So if there is a committee that's working all those issues in regard to when they should have something in town, then I think that we should hear from the community also, because it's a major, major inconvenience. And just so you know, Houses of Worship, where I'm, chairman of my trustee board, when you have events like this, fewer people attend, and that's fewer, unfortunately, dollar bills that goes into the church on that Sunday, and it's fewer everything. It just cuts down on service, cuts down on so many issues. We had about 20 senior citizens that couldn't even show up yesterday due to the Communiversity Day in Over the Park. So I do hear what Mr. Floyd is saying, and it really resonates with me, but I also understand that the town is trying to put on an event. And for us, I'd like to thank the YM and YWCA for allowing us to park, and being as kind as they could to us during that time.
Thank you. Ms. Grenard?
Well, maybe the council can hear from the committee sooner rather than later when all these issues have been discussed, because from what we do have the ultimate power over the date. I think we have to acknowledge that, and so maybe it's a good idea this year, because I agree that it was worse this year. I think there were more cars, it seemed to me. So it's probably going to be even worse next year. So what I'm saying is, I think we should discuss this in public, maybe as soon as the suggestion has been made.
Mayor,
Ms. Ballard?
we would also have the ability to control some parking or set aside some parking, cordon off parking for the houses of worship. I mean, you mentioned the Y was responsive. I mean, maybe we could be a little more proactive in helping them find some
Yeah, absolutely.
Parking.
We know that there's some parking needs. We can try to address that. We have with some of the churches. We did predominantly with the one that's on Nassau Street that needed special parking in the morning for handicapped people, et cetera. So we can do that. But I think it also begs the bigger question, which was what Lance was getting at, and that is that this is a very popular venue for events that are really spearheaded by your local nonprofits in town, and we happen to have a lot of them. So, it does beg the bigger question as to how many of those we can sustain. And they're all very popular now, and they all are growing every year because that's the idea of those events. So it's something that, from a policy standpoint down the line, you may end up having to take a look at.
Yeah,
But in the interim, we'll endeavor to continue to work with them to keep control.
I'd like to point out that there were other events going on in town that complicated matters as well. There was a performance at Matthews Theater in the afternoon, and traffic from Matthews Theater tried to get across Nassau Street to get out of town on the north end of town, and believe me, there was one heck of a traffic jam with people trying to come up from University Place and down Bank Street and around to get out of town. So I think some careful consideration has to be given to the whole issue of parking and traffic before we approve the next Communiversity. Communiversity is a grand event. It's a community celebration, but I think it could very easily turn into a community nightmare unless we get control of the whole parking and traffic situation.
Anybody else? Are there any other comments from the public?
Minnie Craig, Witherspoon Street. I just want to ask, has there been a date set for Avalon Bay meeting with their neighborhood? Since preliminaries are going on already, I would hope that the hospital isn't torn down before we have a meeting with Avalon Bay. So, has there been a date set?
Unfortunately, there's no date yet.
Okay. Well, please inform some of us when a date is set so we can get the word around, and I hope it's sooner than later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just for an update, the developers agreement hasn't been signed, correct? Avalon Bay has not agreed to so.
No, I think that's part of I think we don't necessarily need a signed developers agreement in order to have a neighborhood meeting, but in some of my previous conversations with Avalon, I think they would like to know where they're going and what the testing protocol is going to be before they have the neighborhood meeting. So that's part of the complications in setting a date. But I think it's good to get something on the calendar, so we can try to do that. Anybody else? Okay. I'd like to close the public comment period then and welcome up the Central Jersey Forum. As many of you know, the Central Jersey Transportation Forum is a regional group that consists of about 30 municipalities from Trenton up to North Brunswick. Our own Marvin Reed used to be the chair of it. And tonight we have Bill Neary here, who's going to be presenting, the former East Brunswick mayor and executive director of Keep Middlesex Moving, TMA. And he's the incoming chair of the forum. So with that, I'll turn things over to Bill.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good evening. Good evening to the council. I think the public portion gave such incredible segues to what I have to talk about. It's amazing. And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned the enormous challenge I'm facing by replacing Marvin Reed as the chairman of our Central Jersey Transportation Forum. Former mayor is here tonight, and he's been a tremendous leader to our organization over the past couple of years. We have a little slide presentation to show you about potential problems and issues for the future. So I'm going to keep it brief because I know you have a long meeting. And I'd like to start with the first slide that I think says it all. Is it going on? There we go. This is a sustainable future, which I know Princeton is very much ahead of. I feel like I'm speaking somehow to the choir tonight in this cathedral. Princeton has always been ahead of the curve in so many different things. The municipalities and the counties that we work with, I think, are trying to understand the sustainable issues and the proper problems we're going to be facing in the future. You mentioned I was a former mayor of East Brunswick. At one time, one of my suggestions was to change our name to North Princeton. I figured that would help me by status and for rateable growth, but I couldn't get a whole lot of support for it. I think this slide kind of shows it all. This is the traffic. It's part of the problem here is the low-density residential housing, the highway commercial development. There's no connection between people's homes, their workplace, and their shopping. So how do people go from place to place? Their car. This is the current conditions. I'm not sure you can see all the colors really right here, but basically when you see red, that means the roads are already congested. The orange means that they're nearly congested. The yellow means they're almost congested. And the green ones means that people haven't found the shortcuts yet. They're working on it. Well, the mayor has mentioned the Route 1 corridor growth study that we looked at. And this study already revealed that today, there's more than 13% of our region's roadways are congested during our peak periods, with another 23% nearing congestion. This map in orange and red shows where these roads and volumes exceeds the capacity of the roadway during peak periods today. Just think about it. 40% of our roadways in this region are moving toward congestion during peak periods. Along with this, it was determined that approximately one-half of the land in the region is developed. Another one-fourth is environmentally constrained and therefore undevelopable. But one-fourth of the land in the region remains available for development. That's why we talk about regional growth strategies. The study also revealed that today's region has about 1.8 jobs for every housing unit. So basically 2 jobs for every house. So what would happen if those development patterns were to stay? Well, you're one step ahead of me here, Zoe, but that's okay. This slide shows what the roadway, the network would look like based upon the full build-out. All the red and orange roads are congested during peak periods. Then 93% of the region's roadways would be congested. Well, why? Because the analysis shows that a full build-out, and understand the Route 1 corridor between New Brunswick and Trenton is the last major growth corridor for economic development in New Jersey. We know the future is coming. It would result in 480,000 new jobs, and we have housing units being proposed up to 37,000. That's 13 new jobs for every new housing unit developed. And how does this overwhelming majority of people with the new employees and new jobs get to the work? They drive by car from their housing located many miles away. This is where this comes in. Personal foul, blow the whistle, stop the clock. This can't be allowed to continue. Something has to be changed, or we will choke the traffic congestion and we'll choke on it and stifle any economic development for our future and a sustainable economic growth. So can we take steps to alter our future? The answer is yes, we can. But fortunately, we cannot build our way out of congestion by building new roads or interchanges because it is just not financially or technically or engineering-wise feasible. The answer lies in connecting and coordinating land use and transportation policies and our decisions. The slide in front of us shows existing conditions and the frightening build-out condition and what will be able to viable, sustainable alternative resulting from a Route 1 with different types of plans. Tonight, Ralph Widener is here. He did an analysis of the census for Princeton, which does show you that, fortunately for Princeton Township and Princeton Borough and Princeton overall, that a lot of the people do work in this area. So you do have alternative transportation modes that are available for your residents. But like you pointed out, people still come into this area for a variety of other reasons, and the traffic congestions will not go away. Okay. I think that what you see here is what the development patterns that we've seen in New Jersey over the past several decades. We call it the corn maze. This is what it looks like from the air, I think, if you look down at New Jersey and the cul-de-sacs that we live in most of our suburban communities. These are not connected. There's no connectivity. If you need to go to the 7-Eleven, you need your car. If you need to go to church, you need your car. If you need to go to any place, you have to get in your car. So the connectivity is extremely important. And I think that's what we're looking at for regional growth. We've worked with municipalities throughout the region where they've passed resolutions encouraging this type of regional studies, especially when we're talking out into the rural areas of this region, Mercer, Somerset, and Middlesex County. Those are the types of things that I think Princeton has been ahead of the curve on. But we can't live in a vacuum. We have to make sure we look at the whole big system that we're going to be facing. Go ahead. So what are the benefits? I think you know these. You move the housing and have more housing closer to your projected jobs. Economic development and good jobs is critically important for us in the future. And absolutely, better transit means less reliance on cars. Pedestrian bicycle-friendly communities are a necessary way for people to get around, for all the health benefits, all the clean air benefits, all the things we know about. And less congestion, less pollution. The things that we all know are going to work by regional growth and smart growth strategies. In order to accomplish this, we have to be part of a team. This is what the Central Jersey Transportation Forum has been doing now for many years, is working as part of a team. We have the municipalities represented, the counties represented, a variety of different organizations are always involved, the transit, DOT. People are involved with this committee on a weekly basis in terms of their regular jobs, and we meet on a regular basis to condense some of these thoughts into plans. So be part of the team. If your town wants to be part of this team, stay active with what we do. Stay involved. Let your planning people work, let yourself as leaders of the community work to make sure that this is an idea that's necessary for regional growth strategy that's important. We have a regional smart growth resolution that we're going to give you at the end of the meeting. It's very similar to what you've already proposed and approved of with your sustainable growth and sustainable Jersey application. It's very similar, not much different. It has a little bit more transportation elements. We're going to leave it here for you to look at. I will tell you we've already done this presentation in several towns have passed the resolution. Part of it is complete streets, which I think is very important. Review your key properties. When you're looking tonight, I guess you're looking at some important development that might be coming into where the hospital was. Make sure you understand these key properties, how they fit into a master plan that works. Improve your connectivity. I think bicycles are a great way to get around. At the TMA world, we do that. Unfortunately, I don't ride a bicycle. The state had passed a law about not allowing me to wear spandex, so And I want to thank you so much for taking your time. I know you have a really busy schedule and a tight agenda, so we try to condense it as much as possible, but understand that the Central Jersey Transportation Forum is looking out for the region, and anything we can do to try and help you, try and get your goals and meet our goals, we're happy to work together. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Ms. Carla?
I have a question about regional planning in general. How do, we as a council, we have a moral obligation to represent the interests of our residents and not the interests of the residents in other municipalities. So how do we handle that problem?
Well, that's
do you suggest that we sometimes sacrifice our own residents for the greater good of the region?
Not sacrifice. Sacrifice is too big of a word, but you can make sure that if you're going to be doing something in this area, at least your neighboring towns know about something that's going on. And your neighboring towns, if they're doing something in the region, at least let you know and see if there's ways you can make it work together. I use an example. When I was the mayor of East Brunswick, our border with one of those farm roads that the farmers created 150 years ago was between us and South Brunswick. Well, South Brunswick, as you know, along Cranberry Road is all warehouses. I had just gone through a major purchase of open space, 147 acres of open space. We put in sports fields and dog parks and all that kind of stuff. Across the street in South Brunswick, they were putting big warehouses where the trucks would be coming up and down that road. So before I ever got to the planning board process and everything else, I talked to the mayor and said, what do you want to do that to me? It's right on the border. And he agreed that it made no sense to mix the warehouse and the trucks with the bicycles and the kids. And they now have a residential component in that property. It's just a matter of communication. So it's not a matter of sacrifice. It's a matter of looking at the region as a whole and how it can fit into a big plan.
Right, but so we're having a problem. I mean, when we were discussing the Route 1 problem with West Windsor, sometimes, or a lot of times I would say, especially when it comes to traffic, somebody has to lose. And so how do you deal with that? When you're how do we deal with that when we're elected officials?
Well, I think you're asking the million-dollar question. I don't know. I don't know how you take care of home rule and regional growth in one simple formula. There really is no simple way to look at that. The complicated things that involve the planning and everything else is not going to work in a state like New Jersey where home rule is so strong. But at the same time, communication, I guess, is the most important part, and look at the regional plan. The state has no actual regional plan that's in place, but everybody has environmentally sensitive areas. There's traffic conditions that exist in different places. There's ways to look at that. I think one of the important things that we're looking at is any development should have critically populated areas so that mass transit is so much more available. People should look at mass transit. We're working with the idea of a BRT up and down Route 1, and it's not going to affect your dinky at all, we promise. That was all part of the plans. But the BRT was one of the types of solutions. Obviously, North Brunswick is doing Transit Village with the trains. So there's things that are happening with mass transit that perhaps can reduce some traffic. I don't think it's going to eliminate traffic or even reduce it to where it's going to be totally noticeable, but let's not get as bad as those red lines all over the region. What's it? Sure.
To be in the
Use the mic
microphone,
and turn it
so
on.
people at home can hear you.
This is Zoe Neander. Zoe's with the DVRPC, so the planning organization.
Yeah, sorry, we're a regional planning commission. And what I would say is that you are benefiting your town by participating in regional planning, because if you aren't involved with what's happening in the region, then it's helter-skelter development, which would result in the most amount of traffic and the most unattractive possible land uses surrounding you. And you'd rather have an attractive and less trafficked way to come to and go from Princeton, because people in Princeton do still, come and go, much as it's a beautiful place here. So it is, I don't think the question is how do we represent the needs of our citizens and also be also engage in regional planning, but that we engage in regional planning so that we have the best quality of life possible for our citizens.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. But when those decisions come down to the details, it seems like that's when we have problems. But of course, as much as possible, regional planning obviously is beneficial.
There are always elements that are difficult, but it seems in the long run that it's better for Princeton to be participating in regional planning. Thank you.
Any other comments, Mr. Butler?
Does your group have expertise that would be perhaps helpful to us we're planning some complete streets, but still having some questions about whether to build
Let me
sidewalk?
let me try and do a little advertisement for us TMA worlds. You have Greater Mercer TMA here, and Keep Middlesex Moving is the Transportation Management Association, Middlesex County. We work on those type of programs, the Safe Routes to School, Complete Streets policies, to try and help you get some expertise on it. We provide those services to any organization, especially municipalities and businesses, so we can help you there. The Central Jersey Transportation Forum has a variety of different people from different planning departments, from the counties and everything else who can provide that type of information. But we are a volunteer group. We have a few staff representatives who work with us. But the interesting part about the Central Jersey Transportation Forum, which I think makes it really important, is, I don't know if you understand what an MPO is, a Metropolitan Planning Organization. But an MPO is the organization that kind of determines where federal dollars are being spent on transportation. So there's three different MPOs in New Jersey. There's a South Jersey MPO, there's the DVRPC, Delaware Valley Rivers Planning Commission, and there's the North Jersey Transportation Planning Association, NJTPA. The NJTPA's borders are responsible for the 13 counties in northern New Jersey. They end in Plainsboro. Okay? The DVRPC basically has the Philadelphia region and some of the counties in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And they end in, West Windsor? Right on the border. So the two MPOs have different directions and different federal money that they spend. The Central Jersey Transportation Forum is the only really significant group that cross-pollinates, where you have directors from both of those organizations at our meetings where they actually talk about it. Because I think when those MPOs were created by the federal government, there was a whole lot of open spaces in between. And as time goes on, we're all mixed together now, a lot closer than we were 20 years ago. So I think that's what the MPOs can really do in terms of planning what you're talking about. With Complete Streets, they've endorsed, the counties have endorsed Complete Streets. Many towns have done that, and then they have to follow how it fits your local town.
Right. So we have also endorsed Complete Streets, but I'm saying in our planning is, when you have specific questions about whether you do sidewalks or bike lanes in the street, I'm just wondering whether or not you have expertise that would be helpful to our municipality when we discuss these things.
Yes, we do. We have Greater Mercer TMA would be your organization to talk to. They can come and talk to you about some of the specifics where it fits.
And then when it gets into engineering elements or some grant programs, DVRPC is also a resource. But we work very closely with Greater Mercer TMA. They're in all of our groups.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Ms. Cornell has one more question.
Sorry. You mentioned a huge number of jobs projected along the Route 1. I forget, how many was it?
We had 480,000, but we may have lied about that. That was a projection, but 480,000.
480,000, that just seems, how many of those are going to be in Princeton or right near us? Or
Middlesex, Somerset, and Mercer County.
where are all these jobs? What sectors or?
You want to explain build-out?
Do we know?
Pardon me?
You want to explain build-out?
Build-out, that would be with the, what do you mean, with the jobs?
So,
I'm not sure what the question was. I mean, I didn't say your question, I just know what her question was.
I'm wondering where those jobs are going to be and what jobs are they?
Well, since this is the last big growth corridor that's open, all the jobs will be coming in. You've already seen it. Look at the growth that you've seen in the last couple of decades. We're looking a couple of decades ahead. It's going to continue. The jobs are coming into this region already. They're moving in already. You have big companies moving into this region. Novo Nordisk just did all that work. Princeton Hospital, the Plainsboro Hospital has employed a whole lot more people. You start thinking about the different types of growth there. They're coming. I don't know if 480,000 is an accurate number. I didn't make it up. It's a planning person who did that. That may be a little bit of an exaggeration. I won't.
So if I could just clarify, build-out analysis is saying what could happen given the current regulations and the current amount of land available. It probably wouldn't, because everyone would get so stuck in traffic they wouldn't want to do it. But given current zoning regulations and current land availability, that is what could, in theory, happen.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and that is a key point. I think if 480,000 jobs is the goal, it's not going to happen because people won't be able to get to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Share this
Thank you.
with you, and it just builds on what Bill was saying, and it's a couple of actions that the council could.
Yeah.
That the council could consider at its pleasure.
And I know we have several members of the planning board here. I assume you're mostly here to listen, but I wanted to invite you, if there's anybody from the planning board who'd like to say something at this point, you don't have to. No, just here to absorb. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presentation tonight is, thank you, is on our strategic plan that was done for the municipality's IT department, and I'd like to invite up our IT guru, Bob McQueen, and also Dr. Shannon Haltufs, who prepared the report for us. Thank you. Linda, did you get a copy of this? Yes. Okay.
Okay. Good evening. How are y'all? It's the first time I've been here where it hasn't snowed. I'm very excited about that. I'll come back anytime from now until September, maybe? So just to give you sort of an overview of the strategic IT plan that we put together based on all of the interviews and surveying and then peer analysis that was done. We'll start off and we'll sort of set a framework for understanding what this plan really was designed to do. Thinking about governance and the trends that are out there right now from a technology standpoint, but also from a government standpoint, is a really important part of the discussion. So as we were thinking about technology and technology investments, recognizing that obviously you're facing issues with tight budgets and what that means in terms of improving revenue collections and making sure that those revenue collections are on time. I know that this council has been particularly interested in transparency, and that's a very popular topic to use technology as a way to be more transparent to your citizens. Also in speaking with all the council members as well as other groups around the town, it's been important for citizen focus to be part of the discussion, so thinking about how to leverage technology from a citizen standpoint. And then finally wrapping up with a little bit of a focus on personnel management and performance metrics. So we're going to talk about all of those areas as we go through this. I always have to give some sort of framework for understanding what we think about when we think about technology. And so my area of expertise is working with IT organizations across the country, and specifically helping local governments think about the way that they invest in technology. And the way that I like to talk about this, particularly with elected officials, is that the technology is just a tool, and the tool is only as useful as what you put in the tool. And so as we're thinking through the tool of the technology that we're talking about, it's great for what we want to do in terms of accomplishing objectives and finding good strategies and mapping out our performance, but it's only as good as the information we put in the tool. And so what I'd like to caution folks about is that you don't want to buy a technology and assume that it's going to solve whatever your problems are. I have a story from my personal life where I'm talking to my husband one day and he tells me he's going to go buy a new pair of tires for his bike. And I'm like, okay, why are you telling me? He says, well, they're very expensive. And I'm like, this is rubber for a bicycle, which seems not to be very expensive. And he says, no, they're $100 a piece. And I said, well, why would you spend so much on tires for a bicycle? And he says, oh, they're a certain number of grams lighter. So the technology is advanced, and it's going to make me this much faster. And this is a case where I looked at him, and all of you are going to be thankful you're not married to me, and I said, you know, I'm thinking if you rode your bike a little more often and lost 20 pounds, you'd probably be even faster. But the point is, he was over-relying on the technology instead of actually solving some of the underlying problems. So as we think about this, when you see the first level of recommendations, a lot of those recommendations actually have very little to do with technology. They're around structure and process and standards and procedures, and so I just want to set a framework for that. The other thing that I think is important to notice, and Bob and I actually were just talking about this in his office a little while ago, is thinking about what technology actually does in your organization versus how much you spend on it. So I always ask folks, would you live in a house that you only spent 1% of your income on? Because that's essentially what you're doing at some level. Most of the local governments are spending about 1.5% of their general fund budget on technology. You guys are coming in right around 1.2%. In organizations that I would consider to be superior from a technology standpoint, you're looking at more of a 5% general operating fund versus operating budget. So you tend to see that number go closer to 5%. If you look at the private sector, you'll see upwards of 8%, sometimes up into 13%, but those are very high-tech firms that are spending that much money on technology. So we have to think about what the technology actually supports and what we want it to be able to do as we're working through this. The other thing that, as we're moving along this path, and hopefully it'll give a framework for some of the questions that might come, is that the technology for technology's sake is not a good investment. One of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about in the various interviews was, great ideas. And I think that knowing that there's great ideas out there and recognizing those ideas and figuring out where they fit, and there might be ideas that I've put forth that are great ideas that don't fit with your organization. And so as we're thinking about this, the first question that should always come to the mind of anybody spending money on technology is, what do we do to create public value with this technology? How does it make a difference in the lives of our citizens ultimately? How does this technology make a difference? Does it create a better division of labor? Is this innovation essential? We actually had this conversation over dinner that one of the things that's really unique about Princeton, and I think you've heard it actually by the presentation previous to this, that you are a leading edge community in many ways. And so thinking about a very highly educated population that expects and has a lot of resources at its fingertips, if you will, what they require from an innovation standpoint might be different than what a more rural community would require from their technology. And then finally, implementation is always a challenge from a technology standpoint. There's lots of glitches and things that can go wrong, but a lot of the implementation challenges that we've seen, even since 1995, when the first set of chaos reports came out, it's a study where they look at what causes IT failures. The failures are rarely the technology. It's actually the people, the processes, the financials around the technology. It's actually not usually the IT problem. Healthcare.gov is a great example. The technology crash, or were there processes that were broken and maybe not articulated well as we were moving through that. So one of the things that I like to do when I talk to groups and do strategic IT plans is set a framework for where we think you are and where you want to move to. And this is a process that absolutely sort of falls in March, in like a March step. So you start off being IT as a utility service. It's just as important as your sewers. Nobody cares about the sewer system until it backs up into your house, right? And so the technology itself, the infrastructure, is a utility service. You have to have the utility service in place in order for it to be efficient and effective. Then you work on internal efficiency and effectiveness for town staff, right, to make sure that their jobs are more efficient and effective. Once you move across this matrix, you go into becoming, the IT department becomes a trusted business leader, a trusted advisor to the business units. That's where the business unit, the department comes and says, I have a business problem, and I want IT to help me figure out how to solve it with the tool that is technology. And then ultimately you move into that innovation or change agent mode. One of the things that we often see happening, and it's certainly not, I don't feel like it's happening here, but one of the things we see folks trying to do is go to innovation without investing in the utility service. And that is an absolute nightmare. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention that the utility service is not fun to spend money on, but it's just like your sewer system. If you don't spend money on it and you don't upgrade it and keep it refreshed, you're going to end up with things backing up into your house that you probably don't want there. This is something, I bet you've seen this before. I would imagine. If not, you'll love this, I hope. So this is the cheap, fast, and good triangle. It's true for everything in life, marriage, building houses, you name it. If it's cheap and fast, it's not going to be good. If it's good and cheap, it's not going to be fast. And if it's fast and good, it's not going to be cheap. Right? So you've got to figure out which one of these you're willing to trade off. As we think about IT projects, there will certainly be projects that you will want fast and cheap and recognize that you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the quality. There's other times where you might need it to be fast and good and recognize that you're going to have to pay more. So as we go through this process, we can talk about some of those options that exist. Just in terms of major findings, I will say I was really surprised and pleasantly surprised by the amazing amount of work that I felt was being done in this town. I thought it was really refreshing to see that with consolidation and all the pressures, by the way, I've never seen a town do consolidation as fast as you guys did, so there's some sort of world record that I think was set by that. But it's been really interesting to see how much work was still being accomplished, even given all the moves and the migrations and people changing offices 3 times. So it's really wonderful and refreshing to see that. There's a good technology foundation here. You have a good community support from a technology standpoint. You have good departmental support for technology investments, good administration support for technology investments. Over the last several years, there's been an improvement in customer service from an IT standpoint. This is something I'll note later that always needs to be improved upon. And there's been increased efficiency and effectiveness happening in the town because of the technology. I can sort of cite to the number of projects that have been done, but I've already said, I think it's really impressive the level of technology sophistication, the projects that are being done, given the staffing levels and the budget levels. I'm sure that this will be an area for us to talk about, but staffing levels, in my opinion, should be increased in order to meet some of the demands that were expressed to me from a technology standpoint, what you're interested in, what your citizens are interested in. You have some very wonderful e-government offerings that I think can be expanded upon. I think C-Click Fix is going to be a fantastic resource for your citizens, and you should be commended on signing that contract and putting that into place, and having that sort of one call center is going to be a really beneficial experience for your citizens. I will say that one of the areas where, again, back to that sewer analogy, where you want to be sort of diligent is that you're investing in the technology internally just as much as you're investing in that citizen-facing technology. Because if it doesn't, if the network isn't there, if the staffing levels aren't right, if the technology for the departments and the departmental line workers isn't functioning at its highest level of capacity, then all of the citizen interface is actually sort of just window dressing, if you will. When you think about the true tax dollars that could be saved, it's really going to be on that internal side. We did a survey of the employees, and the results were interesting. I mean, I think they were not surprising, because we spent a lot of time talking to all the different department heads and as well as staff and asking, how people felt about things. Overwhelmingly, I think the very first response that I heard from almost every person that came in was IT's understaffed. And that's reflected in the survey results as well. And there's a series of comments where they clearly indicate that they're moderately satisfied with the IT services that they're currently receiving, and they are the employees of the town of Princeton. So they're moderately satisfied with the services they're receiving. And then there's always a caveat, because there's comment boxes after each question where they say it's not due to the IT department, it's due to they're really stretched too thin. When you look at the numbers of help desk tickets quadrupling in the last year, just based on consolidation and all the requests that come along with that. Bob was telling me they had 61 help desk tickets this past week, which was a pretty substantial number. And you've got IT employees that also get vacation. And so when one of them is out on vacation, it's really hard to keep up with those numbers and try to make sure that that's being managed appropriately. So I think that the consolidation efforts and the focus on consolidation probably delayed some of the other standard requests and the responsiveness to some of those standard requests for projects or even just basic services. So that's probably explaining some of the challenges. What I would encourage you to do with that data is use it as a baseline. I'd repeat that survey annually. I mean, you can have it and you guys can send it out. I can send it out for you either way and run the analysis. But what you want to see is not necessarily what just the data says right now, but what it says next year and what it says the year after that. Are you making a positive movement? Because that'll really give you a good assessment for where the IT department and the town are This is just some comparative data that we put together, and thanks to Bob for helping me grab some of the data from the townships around here. But this is just a rough look. You can see that it's all over the place, depending on where you are. I picked Chapel Hill, North Carolina, mostly because that's where the university is, and it seems very similar, although they're larger than you. Similar in terms of the community, the focus of the community, and the type of engagement that they do outside of the IT space, just the community engagement that the council does. And they have 9 IT staff with 2 additional IT staff in the police department. So recognizing, take that, and they're basically about double your size in terms of employees. And so even there, if I took that and divided it in half, you'd still have 5.5 IT personnel that would be working. Franklin Township has got 4 IT department staff, and then they've got an additional person that's in the police department that helps support. He's actually a sworn officer. And then you go into Plainsboro, they've got 1.5 IT FTEs with an outsourced contract that give them 2 days on site, 2 full days on site. So it's all over the board. Ewing Township, which I believe is probably as close population-wise to you guys, is 5 IT staff with 1 admin. What I thought was quite interesting is the library. The library here, which is an amazing community resource, and I was really impressed by the library, but they have 2.25 IT FTEs, supporting roughly 100 devices. So you take that and compare it, and you're going to hear about some opportunities to partner with them. And then you've got your school system, which is another resource that's available, and we're going to talk about something exciting, I think, in just a second. I think the school system is a sort of a wealth of opportunity for the town. They've already worked really hard to build a wonderful network across the town, and I know that Bob and Peter have been in communication recently and are actually working on, can I go ahead and share it? A shared services agreement for a network engineer, which will give each of them a little bit more support. They currently have a shared network engineer between Hopewell. So right now, that position is going to change, and it will be something that will also be supporting the town of Princeton, which I think is an excellent use of taxpayer dollars. And I'm really excited about that. And hopefully we'll develop some partnerships with the library as well. And speaking with the library director, that's been something that she was interested in as well. So we've got a lot of opportunities to put in place. I'm going to real quickly highlight a couple of the projects. It's a really dense document, and I apologize for the density of the document. You know, it'll put you to sleep, I promise, if you have problems sleeping. But thinking about the projects, I try to give you sort of a frame of reference for the projects, but also whether they required staffing or funding levels. So the shared service agreement, actually that's not going to require additional staffing or funding, and it might be a way to see some cost savings, or at least improve services, which I think is a hallmark of what we want to see accomplished with IT. Certainly there are staffing needs, and I think we're going to have possibly a work session to talk about some of those areas. Help desk has become something that actually Bob has been working on in the last several weeks since he read the report. He's made some changes to the help desk to make sure that they're more accountable and more responsive to the staff. The department structure, accountability and authority. One of the challenges that I think IT personnel face is when there's disagreement between the IT director or the general sort of structure of IT and the way that they feel things should be done, or maybe the policies that have been put in place, and whether exemptions exist in various departments. That exemption process can get to be overwhelming and overbearing to manage. Obviously, network connectivity extension is going to be very time-consuming and costly, but I think there's some great opportunities. I know they're renegotiating the cable franchise agreement right now. Bob and Peter from the school system have been working together to make sure that areas that are not currently connected are going to get connectivity as part of that process. IT governance is something that folks spend a lot of time thinking about, and there's an appendices on how to do IT governance. It's a way to take the decision-making about IT and make it a little bit more democratic. So instead of Bob deciding which projects get done when, where, and why, it would actually be the department representatives working together with senior administration and council to decide which projects get done, recognizing the limitations of the staffing or budget, and then just prioritizing those projects. The website is something that was mentioned, and I know it's in the interest of the council, so that's certainly a project to be worked on. I think Bob's going to have a presentation or discussion in a little while of one area of the website that will be interesting to you. And then as we move through some of this, I believe currently, Bob, there's been discussion about putting in place some basic computer literacy for new hires, which is an excellent idea and way to manage some of the computer literacy issues. And also he's building out a video library for all employees to have access to get that overall training that they need. So there's a lot of pieces that have been put in place to improve what's going on. This is just a diagram to show how IT works with senior management in the business. So really, I always say there's no such thing as an IT project. There are business projects with technology solutions. And when I say business, I mean departments or enterprise projects. So the project shouldn't be about technology. The project should be about solving whatever the business or the department's need is or the citizens' need is, and then the technology is just the tool to get us there. Level 2 projects should be done in the next year, or the next 2 years, 3 years, and there's a variety of things on here. One area that I will mention, and there's opportunity for the council to change the prioritization of these projects. This was my estimation. But one area, the printing and multifunction devices, I talked to Franklin Township the last time I was here, and they moved to a solely networked environment, solely network printers, which is going to create a lot of angst among end users, I believe, because there's a lot of desktop printing that happens here. But their cost compared to your cost, you spend about $50,000 a year on toner. They spend $10,000. So that's a pretty substantial savings. Not to mention that the IT department currently is managing all the procurement of those individual desktop toner cartridges and at times the installation of said toner cartridges. So whether or not that's a good use of those resources is something that might want to be discussed. Other areas that you could see expansion, the townwide dashboard. I know you're working right now on that process, and I think that there should be some IT metrics included in that dashboard. I think it's exciting that you're already doing that. Using technology in other areas, mobile access and applications for not only citizens but also departments. Departments have some great ideas of where they want to use technology, and thinking about those ideas and investing in those ideas. Increasing your social media presence is something that obviously is important, particularly in connecting with certain populations, and I think of it's not even a generational issue actually anymore. Now I think about Facebook, and nobody under the age of 25 wants to be on Facebook. They're on something else. It's people my age and y'all's age that are on Facebook now. As soon as their parents got on Facebook, they stopped being on Facebook. But it's something that you might want to think about in terms of ways to engage with your constituents, ways to communicate with your citizens about what's going on. As we move forward, sort of the next steps, determining funding availability. Obviously, you're in the middle of the throes of the budget as well. So thinking about what kind of funding is available. You still have to have your maintenance budget, your operational budget, just to keep the lights on and things running. You have to pay your licensing fees, et cetera. But then what money is available for other projects that would make a difference in the lives of the community. Figuring out about whether the IT governance structure works and what those decision processes will be. There's one recommendation in the appendices of how that works. Monitoring those metrics. One of the areas of interest is really how do I demonstrate value for the investment I've made? And then this is a question I get asked a lot. And what I would say is you can only demonstrate value if you measure the before. So we've got to start measuring now what the baseline is, and then move forward as we make those investments to really demonstrate that value. If we don't have the baseline metric, you can't actually demonstrate the value. And then evaluate the projects and evaluate the process, the progress on the plan every year. Figure out whether you're going to do those projects, and then update this plan annually, not all 180 pages or however long it is, but just an annual summary, executive report done by the IT staff to the council so they kind of have a good feel of where things stand. I think one of the areas that was really interesting is I'm not sure that all the department heads or all the council members really understood the entire gamut of what IT does and all the things they're responsible for. So it's been really interesting to be able to demonstrate to you all of the projects that get done on a daily basis. Actually, I think it would be wonderful for every staff person, and I'm not giving assignments to staff in the town of Princeton, but to really be able to demonstrate that, because I think this last question is where we ultimately have to be able to answer. The IT department should be able to demonstrate every day what they do that improves the efficiency and effectiveness of the town in accomplishing their goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives set by town administration and by town council. So really thinking about that and moving towards that is the goal of the strategic IT plan. Questions from me?
Great. Well, I want to thank you first, and then I just want to talk about the process first before we do questions. I know we have the resolution on tonight. I think this is just a lot of great information that I would recommend to council just in having this conversation so we don't feel the pressure of having to vote on it, to just get information tonight. And I think there's so much here where we're going to want to revisit it and maybe switch around some of the timing for the priorities. But and I know there's maybe members of the public who'd like to speak too, but let's start
So we're going
with...
to table the resolution?
That would be my recommendation.
I would propose that.
Let's not worry about that piece
Okay.
of it, but if there's questions about the presentation, and then we'll open it up for members of the public too. So, starting from council, is there anybody has a question?
No, I have no questions. I was just going to say that the doctor's credentials are so great, and she did a great job working with us. And I was impressed understanding that about 135 items were completed by the IT department since consolidation. It was so impressive, and major projects. So even though we're 2.5 or 2.3 or whatever we are, it is just amazing how much work the IT department has done so far. So I can only see us just progress in a more positive light. So thank you.
Ms. Krumler?
Yeah, I had a question about, in several places you talked about end user training, assessment of employees, and giving, a basic skills test and assessment before hiring applicants, and then requiring the employees now to take a basic literally, or possibly to take some kind of a computer basic assessment.
Sure. So, and actually, this actually came from one of your department heads, said that, and it wasn't in their department, that they felt that there were town staff that were less technology savvy and probably could use some types of training in how to use the technology. And so figuring out what job descriptions would require that.
Yeah.
Not every job needs to have those sorts of assessment levels. As you're bringing in new hires, lots of jurisdictions across this country have gone to that model, which I would imagine just basic computer proficiency is sort of innate now in anybody that's under the age of 25. But it's certainly something that we want to pay attention to, because almost all jobs involve some level of technology.
Right, and what I was wondering is how have other towns done that, and has it worked? I mean, I thought this statistic was pretty interesting, that most individuals use 15% of software's functionality, and that some of the... I think that rings true, and I'm just wondering how you raise that level.
So the town of Salisbury, North Carolina actually implemented this, and they have a computer proficiency test that they administer to everyone. Once they get to the point of being hired, the HR department actually administers. There's several different options out there, but they do an online test for computer proficiency. And I think it needs to be specific to the job. I don't need to know Excel at the highest levels if I don't work with Excel every day. I just need to know the basics. But Word functionality, email functionality, calendaring functionality, some of those areas, just basically entering calendar information on a shared calendar, that kind of behavior is pretty predominant.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes, actually, with respect to your report, it actually reflects a little bit of a failure versus the model that we had intended to set up with consolidation. We had intended to set up a model where we had a split between internal functionality, internal support, and outsourcing. And you actually seem to take a pretty dim view of the outsourcing side of things in general. Is that just a general professional bias, or is that specific to the situation here?
So a couple of things. Actually, the state of North Carolina the governor, the previous governor, had me do a report because they were considering complete privatization of their entire IT structure. And so in doing sort of the analysis for that, I believe that strategic sourcing is the way to go, which is what you've done. There's a difference. True privatization, complete outsourcing, in most places does not work very well. It's very expensive. So I can cite an example from a jurisdiction in the state of New Jersey where they're receiving roughly 25 hours of an FTE's time in an outsourcing model, and they're paying $75,000. You could actually hire that, a PC tech for that type of pay and have an on-site person. So it depends on what you're talking about from an outsourcing standpoint. I think that strategic sourcing is figuring out what your core competencies are, do those in-house, use strategic resources outside of your own organization for those other areas. You've done that with your network now. The other way to handle that, which is I think what we're starting to see emerge in this jurisdiction and other jurisdictions, is shared services, where you build a partnership. Taxpayer dollars are going to both the schools and to the town. How do we figure out how to share those dollars and make sure that we're getting the best resource available? Probably neither of them could really support a full-time network engineer. Or maybe both of them could, but they just don't have the budget to. So if they share that resource, instead of privatizing it completely, if they share that resource, does that make better use of the taxpayer dollar? It will probably be lower cost. And there is sort of the capture by clientele or capture by agency, whoever is the boss of the employee, the loyalty might rely a little bit more heavily in that space. Wholesale privatization, if you look at the state of Virginia, if you look at Georgia, when you see that wholesale privatization, financially the models don't typically work out.
I had a question about one of the statistics you mentioned during the presentation, that there are 61 call tickets from last week.
Yes.
And it's like, if you look at that compared to the size of the staff, it means like, and I don't know if those are all represent individual employees, but it's like 30 to 40% of the staff had a problem with IT last week. And should that raise some sort of alarm bell? Like, why are so many people having technology issues?
I think that's a great question, and I'm going to let Bob touch on it as well, because I think it's probably easier for him to answer the specifics. I would say, number one, high help desk tickets is certainly a matter of concern. What would make me more concerned is if you had high levels of help desk tickets and then all of a sudden no help desk tickets, because that means everybody's just given up on IT. They're not using them anymore, they're not calling them anymore, they're just doing it themselves. And so in the order of thinking about help desk tickets in Princeton, and probably one of the areas that Bob can speak to more clearly is, a password reset or password change constitutes a help desk ticket. Is that really a technology issue? It relates to technology, but is it something that could be handled some other way? Is there's software out there where that allows you that demand or the challenge response system? So maybe you invest in a challenge response system. If 90% of your help desk tickets are password resets, you buy a system that allows you the challenge response, just like your banks use, that then you just reset your password yourself. It texts a number to you or something like that. Do you want to speak to the 61?
Last week was a little unusual. We can thank the police department for that. They're trying to clean up some of their data drives, and they're creating a drive for officers to do. The problem we have is that the borough police domain and the township domain haven't been joined yet, so we had to work to get this to work so they could save to a township drive because they're logging with borough credentials. So it has a lot to do that those domains haven't been merged yet, which we're working on as a project, but we had about 20 or 25 of those tickets were different cops requesting this drive that they needed, that the police admin wants them to move their documents to.
Yeah.
One of the promises that's always held out for investment in information technology is improving productivity. Are there examples that you can cite of where productivity has been improved, specific examples of how?
Absolutely. So I worked in a community on the coast of North Carolina. It was a county, and they had a one-stop shop, sort of comprehensive licensing, inspection, and permitting process. Lots of places have tried to put this in place. And so what they did was they just put everybody that was responsible for taking the forms at one big, long desk, and they called that one-stop permitting. right? No, she's laughing. She must have seen this before. And so as they did that, they thought, oh, well, this will solve our problem. What we actually decided, what started happening was the backlog was extensive. It was taking 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 weeks to get a permit pushed through. And these are basic construction permits. And then there were times where it was going 6 months out, depending on, and it was during the building time when we actually had good financial forecasts. It was in 2002 timeframe. Everybody was buying vacation property on the coast of North Carolina, and this was a coastal community. And so we have this going on. So they actually were trying to decide, do we spend money on technology, or do we hire 2 additional staff people to take all these forms? And they called me and I said, let me figure out what's going on. Let me map out the process. So we went in and we met with all the staff and we mapped out all their business processes. And they had some really silly rules in place. At times, institutionally, we forget to delete bad ideas. And so what was happening was every form was getting routed multiple places. One of the places it was getting routed to, a permit request, was getting routed to the sheriff's department. Because apparently in the 1940s, in a small area of North Carolina, the sheriff wanted to know who was moving into his community. And that was one of the ways to know, because you didn't use as many contractors, et cetera. You know, usually the homeowner was going to do the permitting. And so they had 23 steps in their process. We reduced the number of steps without any technology down to 11. We automated 7 of those steps. We reduced the backlog and just the traffic in that front door by 60%. By putting that change in the process and then putting the technology in place. So we actually, what was really useful for the county commissioners was that we did spend money. Obviously, you spent money on the technology, but they didn't have to hire 2 new staff people. Because then 3 years later, when the economy crashed, they would have had to let go of 2 new staff people. Because they wouldn't have had the ability to actually keep them on staff, because there was no more permits coming in because everything stopped. And so in that situation, it sort of goes back to the comment about baseline. The way that we measured productivity was I literally had them for 2 weeks make hash marks on a piece of paper of how many customers they saw. And reducing foot traffic by 60% really changed not only the output, but the 40% of the customers that still had to come in got really good customer service because the staff didn't feel as overwhelmed. So not only was there a productivity improvement, but there's also morale improvement.
Ms. Krumler?
Yeah, I have a question about the document and imaging management system. I was surprised that wasn't in level 1 priority. I wanted to ask about that. And also, why do we even have to have an imaging system? I understand in reality why we do, but because somehow, even though all documents are now created electronically, people don't have the electronic versions, right? So we have to scan them in or whatever. Is that what it is?
You receive a substantial amount of paper here. Even if you just go to your various departments, they do receive a ton of paper. And one of the challenges with the imaging system, what you really are trying to do is anything that is a part of the public record that must be kept for however many years of the retention period that are required needs to be kept in some format. So doing an imaging system, you would actually do previous materials as well as current materials. I was talking, and I'm trying to think who I was talking to, one of your department heads that was saying, I can't get access to these files. They're in a file folder somewhere, a file cabinet, and we don't really know where they are. We lost 3 years worth of paper documents, et cetera. There's no image of them. So the document imaging, it could be in year 1. It is a very substantial undertaking to do it right.
Well, that's one of the things that I thought, starting out with a new municipality, shouldn't we be immediately, just trying to do a better job of keeping our documents, track of our documents electronically? Like right now, I think some of them are already in file cabinets and they're not being kept track of electronically. Is that correct? We don't have records of all of our documents on the computer.
Absolutely, I would agree with you on that. And so the document imaging system, to do it right, you have to spend some time thinking about what the file structure is, what the naming structure is. You have to build the system so that every employee knows exactly how to save it, because I've seen $500,000 deployments of document imaging system completely fail because employees name it what they want. Think about your own personal filing system.
I know.
Right? So we would all do our own personal filing system. Well, that's not searchable by anyone when that person is gone. It doesn't make sense. So you've got to set up that format and that process. In addition, employees have to be required to use that process, and that's a pretty large shift in the culture.
Yeah, but in the future, I mean, are people working toward not doing imaging anymore? I mean, this is kind of just I'm just curious about this. I mean, because it seems like we shouldn't be doing
Ultimately,
imaging.
yes, I would agree with that, but I think you're always going to have paper copies of certain things that need to be imaged.
But one of the things that's later on your agenda is the seamless docs resolution. That's a process to stop getting paper for everything. We can put a zoning permit up there that people can apply online. It's stored in the cloud. We can download it if we need it, but we have the electronic version of it, so we're not getting paper. So it's a step to try to reduce the paperwork coming into the municipality so that we can have less to scan, but also have less that we're storing here on premise.
Can we open it up for public comment? Anybody else? All right. I'd like to open it up if there's anybody from the public who'd like to comment on the report.
Good evening. Henry Singer from Princeton. And I'd like to begin by saying that I have read the document. I didn't get a chance to see the presentation until tonight, but I did read the document, and I found it to be an excellent IT strategy plan, and I think we as a community should be pleased to receive it. I think the energy that Sharon has shown here is reflected in the report itself. As you know, this is my area of professional expertise, and I'm pleased to say that I agree with the analysis, the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendations. I agree with the recommendation in particular around an IT governance model, but I do believe, slight point of view, is that there is place for ongoing citizen engagement, perhaps non-voting, but I think there's a place for that, as we have in the Citizens Finance Advisory Commission, very, very similar model. And I believe that, I say that notwithstanding past concerns about we have already enough boards, commissions, and committees. So if you're going to stand up an IT governance organization, I think it would be a good idea to take advantage of the skills in the community. There was a few things that Shannon emphasized in the presentation that weren't as directly in the report, so some of my thunder has been stolen, but that's a good thing. I do think that when we talk in the report about business process reengineering, it's very important to understand that this is not something the IT department can own. It really has to be owned by council, by the administrator, and the departments themselves. What the IT department can bring to the table is the knowledge of what can be enabled. Right? They know what the capabilities of various IT solutions are, but as I think Shannon's story was trying to say, you know, the old saying is obliterate, don't automate. So you have to refine the process first and then see where the opportunities are for automation. So I fully agree with her comments, and it's not quite clear in the report, but I think that's the intent that was being said. I would like to see a little bit more projects that include citizen engagement, like the C-Clicks Fix. The projects seem to be very focused on the use of IT by the municipal government. However, I don't say that that's necessarily wrong, because I think actually in your presentation there is a sequence to things. You have to get your internal house in order before you do too much out with the community. But I think it's important to understand the endpoint model, where you're trying to get to, so you don't delay engaging the community, which I believe is an opportunity. You answered one of my questions. I said was, because it was on the agenda to be adopted as a plan, and I think you've taken it off the agenda to be considered later, which I think is a good thing. There's a lot to be digested there. This is my area of expertise, and it took me some thinking, and I'm sure that it warrants your thinking too. This is a big commitment. I also didn't see, I read the budget. It was a busy weekend for me, and I didn't see, and I didn't expect to see the recommendations be reflected there. The timing just doesn't probably seem to work. So I have my notes here. Is it too late? Hopefully it's not too late, at least to get some seed funding for some of these things. A lot of the projects are actually not funding intensive, but if you could move out, I would love to see you do it. And I am generally very optimistic about it. I will say one thing that perhaps Shannon wouldn't be as aware of as not having been a member of the community. I liked the emphasis on Chapel Hill. I looked at places like Palo Alto and Madison, Wisconsin, that are similar college towns where the community's values are similar. I think in the past, demographics have led us to be a lagging community in terms of investment in IT. Where our demographic is a little bit into the digital dinosaur folks and not the digital natives, which I think you didn't use the terms, but you referred to. But that's not going to go on for very long. Private sector is already seeing that transition where employers can't attract employees if they're not really centric to these IT-enabled models. And I believe that the attractiveness of this community to live will increasingly be considering our relative state of IT maturity and the services that we offer, either enabling the community, the government to provide services, or engaging the community. So hopefully some sense of urgency is about this report. It's not something, I really hope that you don't take the report and put it on the shelf. This is really something to consider as a call for action.
Thank you.
I know I went over my 3 minutes, but I appreciate your
Thank
giving
you.
me a chance to speak. Thank you. And thank you to Shannon.
Okay, is there anybody else? Okay, well then I'd recommend that we'll put it on an agenda when we have some time to go through the recommendations in detail and see what makes sense to try to bite off first year, second year, third year.
Yeah, I didn't say, I think it was an excellent report. I agree with what Henry Singer said, and I also feel the same sense of urgency about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to get to you, PPARs. I know there's things going on outside that need your attention, but I think we'll hold off on the budget and we'll get you guys in before the budget, but we have a couple reports first. So the first is the monthly police report from Lieutenant Courier.
Yes, some of the things that quickly come to mind that we've done recently, we've had a lot of, I'm sorry.
If you actually want to go around, then everybody can see you.
Okay.
Then we can see your face. It's easier.
Better. Okay, some of the things that recently come to mind that we've been doing lately. In April, we've had a decent amount of special events, and we have a lot more coming up in May. Some of the ones that we just completed in April were the Stations of the Cross for St. Paul's Church, the Truck Fest, which was this past Friday night on Prospect Avenue. The students put that on, and of course, Communiversity. In May, we have a lot of other events coming up. The Cyclovia, which is next weekend. Stewart has a 5K race coming up. Princeton High School has a 5K race coming up. Then there's the Fireman's Parade, the Bicycle Rodeo, the Memorial Day Parade, and the Princeton University reunions and fireworks. We just finished up the second half of the immigration and wage theft training that Chief Sutter probably reported on earlier. That was taken care of a couple weeks ago. And I have the Chief's police report here with me now from February. I don't know if there's anything in particular you want me to comment on or have any questions on.
Let's start with Ms. Howard.
Hi, thanks, Lieutenant. I'm glad you could be here. I have a question about the overnight parking that's gotten a lot of attention in the last week, and hope you could shed some light, because I think there's confusion in the public as to whether or not we have a new policy about overnight street parking or whether we're just moving towards more uniform enforcement of a pre-existing policy. So maybe I can let you restate what the policy is, and then we have follow-up questions. But do you want to start with stating what's happened over the last week, and then we'll explore what that means for residents?
Well, we actually don't have a new policy. We're kind of going off the old borough policy for the borough streets. And recently, we've noticed that the permissions for overnight parking is becoming more and more numerous. Almost, some nights are over 40 a night, and it's a lot for the communications officers to keep up with. And we found that it kind of diminishes the actual permit holders that actually go out there and get a permit. So I think what Chief Sutter wanted to do was put something out there that there could be some changes coming with the policy, and the policy could be get tightened up a little bit. And he wanted to put out a word that this could be coming, and, like, put out a grace period, so residents could kind of prepare, that residents and visitors could prepare that there might be some different things that could happen. I don't think that he has an exact plan yet. I think it's kind of like a work in progress, but.
So I've asked him about it too, because I think there is a lot of confusion, and for folks who live in neighborhoods where, like myself, where you have a small driveway and you don't have room, if you have a visitor, I think we want to make sure the public understands that this does not mean that you can't call up. If you've got when my mother-in-law comes to visit, unless I can use this as an excuse, when my mother-in-law comes to visit, I can call and say, I've got a guest tonight because I don't have room in my driveway, and I can still do that a couple times a year if exigent circumstances. Are you?
Absolutely. I think I can think of a couple of people that, for one reason or another, they just don't get permits, or they live on streets where they can't get a permit, and they call every single night. And I think that's the problem. They have a situation where they probably have a small driveway. I'm just speculating. They probably have a small driveway, and they probably have 2 or 3 cars.
So I mean, that's what I understood from talking to Captain Sutter, is that this is really about fairness to permit holders, but it doesn't mean that people can't. I think where there's been confusion, and I've seen a lot of comments posted, is that it doesn't mean that people can't call when they have an out-of-town visitor. If
doesn't mean that, no.
Perhaps what we recommend is that when we have the next report, maybe we can just get a report on how many people have called, and if anybody has any concerns, like they feel like they don't have an ability, if you've got work being done in your house or you've got somebody staying, that's not who it's intended to target. So let's just monitor that. I hope maybe as people understand that it's not a drastic change in policy, that will give some comfort to people who live in the inner neighborhoods, especially where we have these where we have small driveways and we just can't have somebody visit, or once a year I have a rental car that I need to park on the street.
Right.
So, okay, that's helpful to hear. I appreciate that clarification.
Okay.
Ms. Krummeler, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just, the speeding tickets in traffic were way down. It was like in 2013, 118 summonses and only 29 in 2014.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Chief Sutter about that today, and the thing that immediately came to our mind was February was a horrific month with snow.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I'm sure that played a large part in it.
And that accounts for the overtime as well, I assume? Because the overtime is up. And there were so many storms. Is that what it was attributed to?
That could have played into part of that. I don't know what all the reasons might have been, but I do recall some specific situations where we had to close roads and what have you and hold people over. So that could be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Other questions from this side?
No, just thank you. I think overtime was up also due to employee injuries, I think. I think that was some of it.
We do have, that's some of it.
That was some of it, some of our police force.
I think in February we had, I think we had 4 officers out on extended
4 officers were out.
sick or injury leave.
Yeah, so I think that prompted it also to push it up.
Ms. Howard? Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Lance. I mean, as a Public Safety Committee, we've talked about, we're getting close to and actually perhaps maybe below our target number of officers, and so we're going to want to be talking as a council about how we make sure we've got a full staffing, that you guys have the resources you need, and we want to obviously be as lean as we can, but as protective as we can, and so that's something we're tracking, and especially there may be some retirements later in the year that will require us to come back and revisit staffing numbers. So nothing new, but it's something that's very much on the radar screen, and overtime is something we're tracking in the process.
To that end, I'm wondering, are we engaged in a hiring process in some stage of that, in interviewing and applications and?
That's right. Some of you may recall that last year we started the process to create a list, and so we did. Folks will remember that hundreds of people took the physical exam down by the baseball stadium in the university, and so we have a list, and so we have the ability to go back to that list, and then we've already started the process, and we've got folks, we've already pre-qualified people based on the physicals, right?
We're in the process of examining that list now.
Going back, and the issue, of course, is that the list becomes stale over time, so the good news is that we took some steps last year, so we're already part of the way down the process.
Great. Yeah, Ms. Crummer?
This might be a question for the Public Safety Committee, but I saw a document that was a breakdown of all the stops that you've made and by gender and race, and I thought it was really interesting, and I thought the rest of the council might want to see that, and could we make that part of the regular police report? Or is it, because you keep those statistics, right?
We do.
It was very reassuring. I just want everybody to know that we don't racial profile.
Are you saying you want that in the regular police report?
I was just wondering if it could be.
Actually, I can jump in. That when we met last week, the Public Safety Committee, we talked about the folks at Revelstone who are coming in and helping with the dashboard are going to be working with, that's the name of it, right, Revelstone? They're going to be working with soon-to-be Chief Sutter on how to improve the report that we get, because, I think we all would like to see it be more, and so that's one thing we should look at. But you should know that Captain Sutter assured us that he does review the stop data because it's really important for him to monitor officer performance and also, as you said, potential for racial profiling and other things. So it gets reviewed internally and in processes as part of the Revelstone work to improve the dashboard. We want to improve the report we get, and I'll take that back as something to look at, whether we could do that.
Right. I mean, because I thought it was something to be proud of.
Yep.
Great. And I just want to make the announcement that tomorrow is going to be an exciting day for the police department. We're going to be swearing in Chief Sutter here at 5 p.m., and everybody's welcome.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you do any estimate of crowds, like for Communiversity yesterday?
We try to. It's really hard to get a good handle on it. We did talk about it. A lot of the officers that were working the event, that were on foot patrol and what have you, they all felt that the crowd was about the same as it was last year. I think that was estimated last year, at 35, 40,000 throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, it's a pretty swag number, but yeah.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And our next report, I'm going to turn over to Bob Brushite to introduce our new health officer, Jeffrey Grosser, who's here tonight.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. As many of you know, we went through a fairly extensive process that was also very collaborative with the Board of Health in trying to select our new health officer, taking the place of Dave Henry, who was with us for close to a decade. And tonight I'd like to introduce to you Jeff Grosser. Jeff comes to us via his education, both his undergraduate and graduate degrees from Johns Hopkins University, where he was also a standout athlete. So he was, he did both things, had a full college education down there, and comes to us with experience from the Burlington County Health Department, where, again, he was in charge of many facets of their health organization down there. He's also an adjunct professor at Stockton State College, teaching the Introduction to Public Health, which he teaches me every day here. So without further ado, I don't want to say much more. I'd just like to invite Jeff up. He's here with his wife this evening, and welcome him to Princeton. Jeff.
Thanks very much. Thanks. First and foremost, I want to thank Mayor Lempert and Ms. Monzo and Mr. Brushite for inviting me, extending me the invitation to come down and meet everyone. Princeton's such a unique place, especially when it comes to public health.
Jeff, closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
I don't have a microphone in the office, so I'm not used to it. And actually, I wanted to say sorry to the study that had to do with the help desk for IT, because I think I was 20 of those, because I just recently started, so there was a couple of quirks, but anyway. So, going back to what I was saying, Princeton is unique for public health because you have the university, which obviously offers so much. And not only that, but you also have the Board of Health, which has just such a storied group of people. You mention their names anywhere in the state, probably in the country, and people know that they have to do with public health, so that's a great thing. Also, yesterday we're walking through Community University, and the second thing you have to notice is the fact that the residents here just are so engaged in the area, and they want to be part of Princeton and make Princeton a better place. And as a health officer, that makes your job a heck of a lot easier, because that's half of the job is really getting people to come to the table to be interested in the projects or the policies you're trying to implement. So, with that said, I'm just really excited. I'm really proud to be part of Princeton. And, the last 4 weeks have been fantastic. Everybody's been so accepting. And not only that, the Board of Health has been really great too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Howard? Jeff, do you want to introduce your wife?
I was going to. She said she didn't want
Okay,
to.
well, we won't put her on the spot.
So my wife is Emily Grosser. She's a first grade teacher at Southampton Township down in South Jersey.
So, Jeff, it's great. Thank you. I'm so glad you could come, because I've been raving to council about how terrific it is. You bring incredible experience and enthusiasm, and we're already seeing that at work. And just to give my colleagues a sense, as Bob mentioned, you have excellent public health credentials, coming with 2 degrees from Johns Hopkins, and your extensive experience with the Burlington County Health Department. You're older than you look, we can assure people. It's all that time playing soccer, we know. But just to give a couple, you're working on some really important things, including increasing outreach for our WIC clinic. We know there's tremendous need in our community, and he's already partnered with Elisa Nera at Human Services, and you can imagine the dynamic duo that the two of them are. And that's fabulous. You're coordinating with the university, obviously, on the meningitis outbreak. That's ongoing work, and you're just generally focused on modernizing the department and bringing your experience from a county-wide department to that. So it's really exciting, and you even got kudos from Linda Auerbach in the audience that you, I think, went out and, after she came to the Board of Health, you went out and looked at the house. So you've only been on the job in a month, but been really impressed us. So welcome. We're glad you keep coming back. It's very exciting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there is a new policy. When a new person comes on board, they have to take the whole council out. So I've been there for like 5 weeks in a row, so I don't know if you're aware of that.
Fortunately, I already know that there's about 160 restaurants in Princeton, so you guys pick and I'll take you out to one of them.
We'll pick each one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know which ones are clean, right?
All of them are clean.
They're all clean. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, with council's permission, I'd like to skip over the budget for right now, so we can deal with the first resolution, the memorandum of understanding with the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, since there are more of them than there are the CFAC committees. So I'm going to bump you up a little bit. And I don't know, Bob, are you presenting, or Mark, are you presenting?
Yeah, I'll run through the MOU, but I was going to invite Mark up because I'm sure there could be a question I can't answer from their perspective. So, first of all, it's kind of an exciting night we got here finally after many years of discussion, so I'm very excited that we are here. We did a brief review for the council about a month or so back, and just to quickly go over what the terms of the agreement are, it is a 99-year agreement with the squad. The agreement sets forth all of the conditions, which is some of our responsibilities, which will be to remove and demolish the old building, clean up the site, which are our responsibilities regardless of whether or not we had the agreement. PFARS would get an appraisal of their properties. We have received that appraisal, and or appraisals, I should say, for the 3 properties. The document does say only 2. It is actually 3 properties, so we'll clean that typo up. I haven't gone through them, but we do have them, and they're consistent with what the estimated values were, which I think are somewhere around $1.5 million. Upon the execution of the agreement, which is kind of the kickoff to the real project, PFARS will begin to look at their fundraising campaign. Our agreement here is that we are going to help with that to the extent we have any involvement, but we will not get in their way. If they need help, we'll be there to help them, because obviously we want the project to move forward. The cost of the project will completely be on PFARS, except for the things that we're obligated here as far as providing a site for them to build the building on. A couple of key things in here is what I call the go-no-go point, which deals with the financing of the project, and that will be something that's mutually agreeable upon. It's in the paragraph 9 of the agreement. Before we go out to begin to finance, whether it's bands or whether we go to permanent financing, we need to sit with representatives of the squad to find out where we are with fundraising, how we might need to structure the debt if we need to, whether or not there's clearly enough capacity for them to raise the money, or if there's not, some other decision would be made as to how the project might move forward. So that's kind of the critical element. But in order to do that, we need to know what's going to be built, how it's going to be built, the cost of the project, et cetera. So that will all be kind of some of the first orders of business. They will stay in their building till the new one is done. That's one of the benefits of being able to have this project built on what will be a vacant site, so they don't have to worry about relocating or some temporary headquarters. And once that's done, they've agreed in this to then give us those 3 properties. They'll get a credit for the value of those. That's obviously going to be a benefit to the town, because we'll end up owning both parcels of land, the parcel that's out here, and I keep pointing to behind me, and whichever direction it is, and obviously the properties on Clearview and Harrison Street. The last big part of this is that we need to work with DOT, and our engineering department will do that, in which to try to work out how the traffic situation will work around those multiple sites on Valley Road there. So we need to get them egress and ingress off of Valley Road. The ingress is not such a problem. We can handle that one, but the egress, we're going to need to work with the DOT, close off one of those access roads, in which to give them a sufficient enough size property, and then look at how we get that access to 206. So that is something that is our obligation to work through. The last big thing is the zoning on the property is likely going to need to have a small modification to allow what I would consider this to be a public use, but we should spell it out just to keep the zoning clear. We don't want to be building a structure there that is a non-conforming use. Even though you can, as the local government, do so, I think it's always been the policy of the former 2 Princetons to try to be compliant with our own zoning to the extent we can. So I think those are generally the highlights of the agreement. I'll answer any questions, but before we get to that, maybe if Mark has any comments from the squad's perspective, we can do that.
Sure. So thanks to Bob for doing a lot of the legwork, and thanks to the whole council. It's been a long process. We were commenting on the way over here tonight that we've actually been working on this project actively for the last 12 years. So to finally get to this point this evening is quite a relief to the squad. Without having an actual site that we can say to people in the community that we have a place that we're actually going to build this, it's impossible to raise money. So your action tonight, if you all agree, which we hope you do, will allow us to actually start a process to look into starting our fundraising campaign and actually get this going. I'd also like to, at this time, we'll get a formal letter of thanks out, but I'd like to thank the town and the people on the town council that worked with the university on the agreement, and that we're a recipient of a significant amount of money to help us with the effort to build a new building. So that's quite a significant thing to happen, and we're very appreciative of everyone's efforts on our part. So I'm going to stop talking because I just want you to vote yes, and then we'll all be happy.
I have a question about the cleanup of the site, and was there a cost estimate to how much that was going to be?
I believe the estimate was around $250,000. If I remember the numbers, $240-ish, plus the demolition of the building, which hopefully we'll be able to do a majority of that ourselves. If not, then we'll contract out some of that. So yes,
And the timing of that was as soon as possible, so, all right.
As soon as you say go tonight, we'll be saying go in the office, and that'll have to be a project that'll be bid out. Bob has done a good job of monitoring that over the years, so we have a pretty good pulse on what needs to be done there, but we will have to bid out the actual work.
And if that work's going to take place in 2014, is it in the budget for this year? It is, okay. That's great. Yeah, Ms. Krummeler?
Yeah, I just had I'm very supportive of this project. I think it's great. I had one minor concern. On page 4, the agreement says, Princeton agrees that upon the acquisition by Princeton of the PFARS properties, said properties will be utilized by Princeton for a public purpose that meets the health, safety, and welfare needs of the Princeton community. But if we decide to sell that property, which I think is a possibility, a distinct possibility, does that...
It doesn't preclude you from selling the property or
but
properties.
It kind of sounds like it does. It sounds like, let's just, if we decide to sell it to private people to live in, those two houses, it's not a public purpose.
All you would need to do is to declare it surplus property, and then you could either rent it out if you chose to do that, or, give it to an organization to operate it for you, or you could sell it piecemeal, one property, sell two, sell all three. Those are things that you can do you have the statutory authority to do it. Once you own the property, the purpose of the language in there was that we're accepting it for some public purpose.
No, I understand that, but it says, said properties will be utilized by Princeton for a public purpose, when they might not be utilized.
Well, I wanted to hear Mr. Brushi's answer, because I had exactly the same question you did, and I just wanted to let him finish the sentence and hear.
Well, I don't know that we're wed to that language, but the idea there is you would have the opportunity to use it for a public purpose. That's why you would take it. You wouldn't take it for a private purpose.
No, I understand.
Can I recommend a change to it, which might address it and just say that meets the health, safety, welfare, and/or financial needs of the Princeton community? It leaves it open.
I have a comment on what I consider to be an excellent MOU, Bob, and very good job in drafting it. Section 18 of the MOU is very clear about the responsibility of the municipality to provide any environmental cleanup on our site if and when it's necessary. I'm wondering if there shouldn't be some reciprocity, words that cover reciprocity for the PFAR site, particularly the site on Harrison Street that's been in use for a number of years. And I'm not suggesting that there's any problem there, but I think that there should be a reciprocity in the agreement as far as cleanup, if necessary, of that site.
That's fine. We've never had any fuel tanks of any sort on the property or anything to cause that kind of problem, but fine.
No, I'm not suggesting that there is a problem. I'm suggesting that there be reciprocity if something is found at a later date.
No, that's fine. You haven't been dumping on our property late at night, have you, Brendan?
Ammonia bottle.
But are you saying that if there was a significant problem, PFARS would be on the hook to fix it themselves? Is that what you're saying?
Before we
acquire it?
Before we acquire the site, yes.
So let me just ask a question. Being that there's no indication that there is any kind of problem and there's no history that would suggest there would be a reason for a problem, who would be responsible for any sort of testing or investigation of that? It's not an expense that we are looking to take on, to be honest.
I think the practice, as I understand it, is that if a problem is encountered during demolition, then you deal with it.
That's fine.
I'm not anticipating a problem. I'm simply saying that if a problem is encountered during demolition, then you deal with it.
Okay.
Let me also just ask Bob a question, because the demolition is actually not going to take place if there's a demolition, until we own it. Perhaps what we can do is agree here that we will do a phase 1 environmental, which you would do if you were buying properties. Then we would have someone come in. I don't think they're all that expensive as part of even it's a free acquisition, but as part of that acquisition, we will undertake that so that we know what we're getting. And then if there is some environmental matter, obviously we'll have to take that up with the squad. All right? You do that? That sound okay?
Okay, so just to be clear, we'll add a number 19 that says the municipality will conduct a Phase 1, what's it called, a Phase 1 environmental study, environmental report, and that if a contamination or